I want to introduce Al Huang. Al is going to be the moderator of this next panel discussion. He is the senior attorney in NRDC's, that's the Natural Resources Defense Council's, urban program in New York. We got it. In New York, Al coordinates the environmental justice work at NRDC. He litigates and advocates on behalf of low-income communities throughout the country who are fighting environmental hazards, utilizing a model that emphasizes community-based organizing and technical and legal resources in support of those struggles. Al is also a board member of WE ACT, and I really want to uplift him and thank him for all his years of hard work in terms of service and fighting legally the battles that many EJ communities around the country need to have to create things like healthy housing. Al has had some very significant victories right here in New York City with the New York City Housing Authority. Al Huang.
Thanks, Cecil. So let's bring our panelists up here right now. And I think, Cecil, you're on this panel too. So
I'm not going anywhere. This
is probably the easiest job, moderating, because I don't have to be the presenter. But thanks for having me here and having this great panel. This is slated as a policy solutions panel, but what we're really going to do is we're going to talk about community-based approaches to springboard to a policy solution setting. So first we'll hear from Alicia Barksdale, who is a WE ACT member and is born and raised in Harlem, and she is the president of the 333 Broadway Tenant Association. She's a community advocate and currently is the vice chair of the West Harlem Empowerment Coalition, chair of the Housing Coalition Against Downsizing Tenants Helping Tenants, and co-chair of the NAACP Mid-Manhattan Branch Housing Committee. It's a lot of credentials.
I know.
And so, well, I'm just going to go and introduce, yeah. And then after that, we're going to hear the community-based perspective first, and then Bill Sothern will present more on the science piece, and then Cecil and Matt will present on the community-based advocacy piece. You know, as a lawyer, I often think about litigation as the main tool, but I think this panel is really going to present on how community-based approaches really are where the solutions come from and should come from. So, Alicia, go.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you. My name is Alicia Barksdale. I am the TA president for 3333, a resident also, and a member of WE ACT. And thank you, WE ACT, for inviting me today, and this is a great job that you're doing. I plan to talk about some key issues that we have facing my community, our community. And working with WE ACT and other organizations, we're trying to rectify these issues. It's a work in progress, it's hard, and because our community is up and coming, gentrification and everything that's going on, it's very hard for us to have our voices heard. I'm sure that you saw all the large pictures outside of the posters outside. If you haven't, please go outside and look at them. These are pictures taken by community people from my building, myself, and we're sharing what we see and what we feel that's going on in the community, and sometimes pictures speak louder than words. First, a little bit about my building. Now, I don't know how to do PowerPoint, so work with me here. Ah, here it goes. This is my building, 3333. We have 1,200 apartments, 5,000 people, 135 floors. As you see, this is the area facing Riverside Drive. Over here, that's MTA Bus Depot, okay? And we have a public school under us, and we also have a garage under us. So now, just picture this in the middle of MTA, we have Columbia University construction going on, we have the Riverbank Park sewage power plant, we have the West Side Highway, Amtrak, and we have City College Engineering School up there. So it's like a triangle, the Bermuda Triangle of poor air quality coming on. So, as you see here, I try to make a triangle, but I don't know how to do PowerPoint too well. But at the top is City College School of Engineering. It's on 137th to 135th Street and goes down to Manhattanville Community Project from Columbia University, MTA Depot, Riverbank State Park, the highways in between there, and MTA Construction. And 3333 and other buildings are in the middle. So these are the things that we're facing, and these are the problems that I really think that WEAC has been helping us with, and other organizations. My building management, they understand what we're going through. Columbia has offered my building, and just the side that was facing Riverside, air conditioners to help the air quality. I don't know what that meant, but the air conditioners were supposed to make the air, they told us, to clean the air that comes into the apartment from the construction site. So, go figure. Now, North River Sewage Treatment Plant, that's on 145th Street. Everybody heard of Riverbank State Park? That's the park that has the sewage plant under it. Every day, a certain time, DEP comes with their boat, and they come and take from the East River sewage plant and brings it over to the Riverbank State Park sewage plant and puts the sewage in there. And every morning, you see a white foam on top of the Hudson River. And also, when they're doing that, you smell the odor coming from there. And there should be pictures coming out of the River State Park sewage plant, and that's a concern, especially when I live on the 35th floor, and you can smell it very bad. So the emission from the plant, keeping records of the emission is what I do, and I give it to WEAC. I take my cell phone, and I send it to Charles and everybody, say, look what they're doing. So Manhattanville, the bus depot and the West Side Highway, the bus depot has been there for about 6 years or a little bit longer, and every day the buses from all the number 5, 4, 11, 101, 100, all these buses come there. They start out in the morning, and they're coming through where there's a school and there's residents that live in this area, and they're idling their buses. So this is the air quality that we're getting from there. So a lot of kids in my building, we have about 2,000 kids. They have asthma, and the seniors have upper respiratory problems, and this is a concern. So when they go to get treatment, it's not something that is easy for some of them, because some of them are scared to go get treatment because they don't have the medical coverage. But these are the things that we are facing, and these are the things that we want to really, really get rid of. So we monitor the buses that come in. I monitor the construction site. So I'm just like the little Snoop girl that goes around and just monitoring things. Now, Columbia Manhattanville projects, the demolition, the pests, the rats, we've had surveys, and we've had forums on rats, and we all know that's a problem. And the emissions of the things that they're doing is really, really hard on us. We practice negotiating with them. They say they're studying the air quality. WEAC is definitely doing the air quality in the area, and the air conditioners really don't help. So that, I have no. Another issue we're facing in the area, and I think a lot of buildings, is the conversion of number 6 heating oil. My building is still on number 6 heating oil. They said last year that they were going to convert to number 4. Did anybody see the conversion? No, I didn't either. So now, with the building that has 5,000 people, 1,200 apartments, still burning number 6 oil, the chimneys are still coming out, the soot, the black soot, and I have pictures taken of all this, and it's not healthy, not only for the community, but for the area itself. We have a lot of buildings that are tenement buildings that are around us, and they said they're going to convert, which such a large building, it's hard to convert because they have to change their whole boiler system. So they say they are working on it. The smaller buildings that are burning number 6 oil, I think the city, WEAC is definitely going out and working with them to make sure that they can convert and make it affordable for them, because that is a large issue for the landlords or the owners to convert to number 2 gas, natural gas. Internal organizations and the community-based organizations and tenants manage to convert a cleaner burning fuel sooner. So me as an advocate for the community, I work with my building. I bring WEAC and other tenants from other communities to our meetings so they can be sure and aware of what's going on and how to start up a panel so they can start discussions in their area about their air quality. As West Harlem Empowerment Coalition, I'm the vice president. We give street events during the summertime. We have WEAC there, and we notify the tenants, and we enlighten them, letting them know what they can do, let them know what we act does and everything that's going on in the community so they can participate. And as a member of We Act, I'm so honored, and I want to thank everybody again for having me here today.
Hi, I'm Bill Sothern from Microecologies. We're an environmental consulting and environmental cleanup contracting firm. We are the private sector guys in the room. And I'm, as much as Al said, I'm going to talk about science, and I do know something about, the science of indoor air quality. I'm really here today to talk about the way that we've used, our expertise, our scientific expertise, our building, engineering, construction expertise, our remediation expertise, to interface with the community on numerous community collaborations that have produced positive results. And we all know that many of the public health initiatives, the community-based initiatives, are not well funded and could use additional funding. And we all know that corporations are out there sitting on trillions of dollars of cash that could be used to benefit the public health initiatives if we didn't necessarily villainize corporations, but tried, as much as they are villainous in some ways, to appeal to their better, more altruistic side, to get involved in community outreach programs. And the way to do that is to convince corporations that it's in the best interest of their stakeholders. And microecologies is a good example of that, because we've been involved in community outreach programs for the last 15 years. We're a 21-year-old company. We have been working with our community-based partners. We're based in East Harlem, but we've been working with Little Sisters of the Assumption in East Harlem since 1997. We wrote the AIM program in 1997, the Asthma Intervention Methods Program. That program was endorsed by some of our clients, like the Fireman family, who owns Fiorello's Cafe and a number of other major restaurants in New York City. And through their help, and through the help of a lady named Mary Daly, who some of you may know, and with the help of Richard Brodsky, who at that time held the purse strings from the New York State Legislature, we raised $2 million. $500,000 went to Little Sisters of the Assumption, $500,000 went to Queens College for their mobile lab, $500,000 went to Mount Sinai. Nothing came back to microecologies at that moment, but over the long term, the effort that we put into that program has paid tremendous dividends to our company in terms of our reputation and our being brought in by those partners on other projects that have been for-profit projects. Similar results happened as a result of our engagement with Katrina, where we were among the first responders, and where our efforts there were helpful in the community by our creating a guidance document for mold remediation, water damage, and mold remediation. We've collaborated with Tulane University, again with Ray Lopez of Little Sisters of the Assumption, who was the cameraman. We created a video that was peer-reviewed and was adopted by the World Health Organization as a how-to video for people who were suffering from the results of flood damage and consequential mold contamination. And that enhanced our reputation. I can't tell you how many calls we get as a result of that added credibility. We're also recognized now on the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene's guidelines for the assessment of and remediation of fungi in indoor environments. And when people see that, they tend to call us rather than calling our competition, because we have a higher credibility index. And that honor came as a result of our engagement in community projects over the years. But that's just a little bit of background. We also are very involved in lead poisoning, particularly every Christmas, and it's just this time of year that we do it. We go out and we go to the local 99-cent stores in Harlem and in Jamaica, and we buy a bunch of jewelry and coated bobby pins and hair clips, and the amount of lead that we see in these products are ridiculous. I mean, we have 100,000 parts per million, 200,000 parts per million, with rubber-coated bobby pins that little girls put in their mouth when they're fixing their hair. And we're trying to get the CPSC to get involved with it. We haven't had a whole lot of luck, despite Deborah Nagin's help a couple of years ago. Let me just go through this one example of what the public-private governmental collaboration has the power to do, because we're very concerned about asthma. And the problem is that we know that asthma is related to water damage and mold. We know that housing that is not well maintained has a propensity to have more water damage problems and consequential mold problems. We know that the literature suggests that between 20 and 25% of all incident asthma is caused by exposure to water damage conditions, and primarily mold being the contaminant. And I'm saying to myself, in 2007, isn't it time that we did something to try to intercede with this? And we know from our having conducted many thousands of investigations that the #1 substrate that mold likes to grow on is sheetrock, because the paper covering of sheetrock, that refined cellulose paper covering, is very colonizable. And it's also kind of sneaky, because sometimes it's growing on the backside of the sheetrock and wall cavity, and people don't even know it, but they're being affected by it. So we thought that the one thing we could do with building codes, maybe the most important thing, at least, that we could do with building codes, was to prohibit the use of paper-faced gypsum board in areas of building, that's AKA sheetrock, in areas of buildings that are likely to sustain water damage over the useful life of the building. So we sat down, and with help from Matt Chachere and from We Act for Environmental Justice, we wrote the proposed code change amendment. We took it to the IBC, the International Building Code Conference at the ICC in Palm Springs in 2007, and we got shot down. We got shot down over a technical issue, but we got a fair amount of support. Kizzy Guzman at that time was with We Act, and she then went to the mayor's office, and I think I have a slide on this, but she then went to the mayor's office, and she picked up the gamut along with the mayor's office and along with the USGBC, the U.S. Green Building Council, the local chapter, Urban Green Council, and together they got this code change amendment put into the Green Codes Task Force book, and with the help of with the help of Superstorm Sandy, and then the support of City Council member Stephen Mateo of Staten Island. And of course, Staten Island was so badly affected by the ravages of Superstorm Sandy. The code change was enacted by the City Council in October of 2014, and it is now law. There is no more sheetrock allowed to be used in subterranean space, in basements of buildings, in plumbing chases, on bathroom ceilings, in areas that are most susceptible to water damage over the useful life of the building. And this is now enacted into code in New York City, and of course, New York City's building codes are frequently adopted in whole by other municipalities around the country. And so this change, I think, has a potential to have a substantial impact on the prevalence of asthma throughout the country over time. So I wanted to just, do I have anything else here? Just it's a general statement about how our private sector people, if they use their expertise to engage in community efforts, and they build collaborations with NGOs and with the government and with the community members, tremendously positive things can happen, and they can be better financed, because the private sector has a lot of money that we need to tap into. So I just want to close with a quote from Margaret Mead that says that never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, concerned citizens can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has.
Thank you, Alicia and Bill Sothern. I just want to say, Bill, I had the opportunity to work with him on our NYC lawsuit, and the work that he did working in hand with Manhattan Together, Little Sisters of the Assumption, South Bronx churches, really made our case. If we didn't have Bill's excellent work going into apartments, building trust with tenants, we would not have been able to do what we did. Next is Matt Chachere. He's a staff attorney at the Northern Manhattan Improvement Corporation. He is one of New York City's top lead paint experts, spearheaded class action lawsuits to protect children from lead poisoning. In 2011, he was awarded the United Neighborhood Houses Award for Civic Advocacy. So, welcome, Matt.
Thanks. Unfortunately, Albert's not the first person to mispronounce my name, but I never take offense. I think most of us have a sense of what these statistics are, and we're going to hear this again and again today, that indoor hazards, we spend most of our time indoors. We've got 1 million people in New York with asthma or asthma symptoms, that it's closely related to housing conditions. The health department says tenants with pest infestations are 1.5 to 2 times as likely to suffer from asthma. We know about the adverse effects of mold and unsafe remediation. And however, the last point is really what I want to focus on, and actually Joel Kupferman mentioned before, enforcement is key, and I absolutely agree. I mean, New York City has an existing code enforcement infrastructure we could really be doing a lot with, and we're unique in a couple of different ways. First of all, New York City has rent regulation. Now, that may not strike you off the top at first as an environmental issue, but let me just give you the context of it. You go up across the border of the Bronx and Westchester, once you're outside of New York City, if you're a tenant and you complain about conditions in your building, when your lease comes up, the landlord doesn't have to renew it, okay? That doesn't happen in New York if you're rent regulated. That's a key part. Secondly, in addition to a buildings department that enforces a buildings code and a health department that enforces a health code, we have something called the Housing Preservation and Development Department, HPD, which is charged with enforcing something called the Housing Maintenance Code. And this applies to multiple dwellings, that's 3 or more unit buildings, which is most of the housing that's rental property in New York City. And it covers everything from heat and hot water to leaky faucets to door locks to vermin to lead paint, many aspects of housing maintenance. And they have a number of inspectors who could be much better used to protect public health. And I'll just give you a context of this. Before the lead paint law was enacted a few years ago, we would see routinely that when a client showed up who had a lead-poisoned child, we would go and check the records and discover that HPD had been in that family's home only months before, never wrote up lead paint violations. Why? Because the tenant didn't complain about lead paint. They were complaining about a leaky faucet. The inspector would walk in, see peeling paint, see a child sitting there, and they wouldn't write it up. Or they would write violations and they would just sit there forever until a child became lead poisoned. The problem is that HPD traditionally has not seen itself as a health agency, as a public health agency. It's really seen itself, in my view, as a bricks and mortar type agency. And I'll tell you that shortly after the lead paint law was enacted, I had lunch one day with an HPD attorney who I will leave unnamed, who said, "Matthew, please don't push forward on mold and other asthma triggers. We've got too much on our plate." So, you know, here's the problems with the current system. We have triggers which become chronic. There's no meaningful time frames to correct them. We don't use IPM, integrated pest management. We have the toxic pesticides which are being used. We have state-of-the-art guidelines for dealing with mold that were written by the health department, but they're guidelines. I can tell you that if I go to housing court and I try to ask a judge to order the landlord to fix it, the judge and the landlord's attorney is going to say, "Counsel, you know they're just guidelines." And they're right. And ultimately, HPD doesn't normally require that the underlying causes be corrected. So this is what one of my clients' apartments looked like after months of litigating in housing court, where the landlord fixed the mold problem. That's what it looked like a few months later. So the reality is, the question is, how do we change the dynamic here? And, you know, this is Chachere's model of how we do political change in New York City. Your mileage may vary. That's a rally we had when we introduced the lead paint law. This tall guy over there is now mayor, so maybe he'll be helpful. You have to educate, we have to demonstrate, we need to legislate, we need to litigate, and above all, we have to organize. But what do I mean by that? Well, in the lead issue, you can have totally great-looking laws, but we need to have laws that actually are based upon what's affecting our clients, what's affecting these communities, based upon the real-life experiences of tenants who are struggling with unsafe housing and totally dysfunctional agency responses to it. And you need to have these laws enforced. And I worked in the lead issue for many years, and here's one of the things that we were dealing with. First of all, New York City was one of the first jurisdictions in the country to ban lead paint in 1960, yet the Board of Education continued to use lead paint in schools till 1982 in violation of our own laws. We were one of the first jurisdictions to actually require that lead paint be abated in child-occupied private housing in 1983. Nobody paid attention to that law. The city didn't enforce it, the landlords ignored it. Thus, we brought a class action against the city to try to enforce these laws. And it resulted in numerous orders against the city to enforce the law, which the city would ignore until we would get contempt of court sanctions against the city. But ultimately, what happened is that the Giuliani administration and the real estate lobby, which is very powerful, teamed up to revoke the law in 1999. So then we had to sue again to overturn that law using actually environmental law principles. Based upon those experiences, we realized we needed to try to construct a new framework for how to deal with lead poisoning. So advocates got together and drafted what's now known as Local Law 1 of 2004, and it incorporated the things that we were learning from parents, from tenants, from clients about what was not working between the ideal and the reality. And the law that's currently in place is very much based upon that. So, for example, I had that situation of HPD going into people's homes and not looking for lead paint because they weren't complaining about it. The current law says that whenever somebody calls HPD for a complaint or whenever HPD enters a home to do an inspection, they have to ask, are there any children here? And then start looking, if there are, for lead paint hazards. You know, believe it or not, in the first year, I was at a public hearing and an assistant commissioner at HPD complained. He said, the law is not working because we've written 4 times as many violations for lead paint. And I said, no, those violations were always there. You're just finally actually looking for them. You know, it's not like the lead paint was created recently. But how do we get there? And that's really the key question that I want to stress today. Because, you know, how do we affect public policy for a constituency that's normally out of the loop for doing this? I mean, lead poisoning, for example, chiefly affects poor children of color. These are not the constituencies that make public policy in this city usually. It's real estate. They're the ones who control this, traditionally the city council. So, you know, one of the things is we go back to organizing. We started to draw the lines between, it's not just a health issue, it's all these issues. It's an economic justice issue, it's a housing issue, it's an education issue, disability, civil justice. You start looking for the linkages, and we built a coalition of organizations that had interests and issues combining all these issues. And the last, of course, is the environmental justice issue. Last in this list, but not last in importance. This was one of the maps we used to organize around the lead poisoning issue. This was what we called the lead belt. And the red areas were the highest areas. And if you start looking at asthma and the relationships of housing, you'll see something very familiar. Here's the asthma belt. Look familiar? Here is the cockroach belt. If you're from New York City, you'll recognize what neighborhoods these are. Here is the pesticide belt. And if you look in the back of your packet, you'll see a 2-page flyer about the asthma prevention bill that's out there, and we have the leak map belt, and it's always the same belts. So we need to think about, how do we make those connections? Because they're similar with asthma. It's a health issue, and it's also, there's the pesticide issues, there's the housing issues. It's all about good building maintenance. I mean, the issues that create lead hazards are often the same ones that create the asthma hazards, because the leaks, the failure to maintain the building envelope leads to peeling paint. It also leads to the mold. It also leads to the pest harborages. Of course, there's the education issue, the kids who are losing school days, the economic costs, the disability issues, and the environmental justice issues. It's the same connections, and that's how we need to start building a larger coalition on this. I'm not going to have time today to go through the details of what this proposal is to affect the asthma triggers, but there is a bill which is explained in this handout at the back of your packet called Intro 385. In order to get here, we're going to have to, as I said, build these coalitions. It's already supported by the Coalition for Asthma-Free Housing, which includes a lot of environmental justice groups and medical advocacy groups. It would be enforced by the health department, by HPD and by the health department. It would have a mechanism for referring from medical providers to the health department to do inspections in people's homes who have severe asthma issues. And it's very much modeled after the lead law. It targets dwellings with persons at risk. It heightens landlord responsibilities. We can't have landlords say, I'm not going to do anything until HPD inspects. We have to have an affirmative obligation for landlords to inspect their own buildings. Has a mandate for timely and adequate inspections by code enforcement, and safe work practices. I mean, those guidelines can no longer be guidelines. They actually have to be something that's enforceable. And it focuses on dwellings, particularly with persons who have asthma. And that's the focus of this presentation. Again, I just think we're going to have to really think outside the box and think about building a much broader coalition in order to bring this to fruition. That bill was introduced the first time 6 years ago in the City Council. It comes up with every new council. It's never had a hearing yet. If we don't build that larger constituency, it's not going to happen. We need to look for all of our partners. We need to look at the rent regulation community, because we need them. We need to protect rent regulation. Without that, we're not going to have effective code enforcement, and vice versa. Anyway, thank you.
May I apologize for mispronouncing your name. I have the same affliction with my last name. So I realize how annoying it could be. Next is our skipper, Cecil Corbin-Mark. He doesn't really need an introduction, but in case those who don't know, this is like old stuff, but he has a BA in political science from Hunter College and a master's in philosophy and international studies from Oxford University in the UK. He currently serves as the deputy director of We Act for Environmental Justice, co-coordinator of the Just Green Partnership. He's a member of, well, this is actually old news too, Governor Patterson's Renewable Energy Task Force. It's an important task force right now, and the Commission on the MTA Blue Ribbon Commission on Sustainability.
So, I don't have my link. It's fine. Just go. Got it. So, thank you all again for being here. And you begin to get the sense of somewhat of why you were invited, right? Matt ended on the issue of helping us, the necessity, to build this bigger coalition. And so that's what I want to spend 2 minutes today talking with you about. Our mission as an organization is about building healthy communities, and it's by engaging low-income people and people of color in evidence-based policy campaigns that we are going to win the systemic change that is actually necessary to save our communities, protect our health, and build those healthy communities that we believe in. For us, our model, Matt talked about his model, and coincidentally, it's really very similar. Our model is about organizing residents in the communities where they are. It's about engaging those residents in the partnerships of research that we have with people like Dr. Regina Santella. And it's about getting evidence from that research with our good colleagues and allies, some of whom are here today, like Dr. David Evans, to help us build the case, because far too often, when members like Alicia Barksdale are complaining about particular issues, they're told, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, oh, it won't hurt you, when they bring their anecdotal evidence of the pain and suffering that is actually happening in their homes and in their communities to those that they believe should be able to give them some relief, whether it's a landlord or whether it's the city council or whether it's the mayor of the city of New York or the president of the United States. Communities are far often disengaged from the process of shaping the policies that need to be in place to help change the lives of those on the ground in impacted communities. And one of the things that We Act believes in is through the success of some of this modeling of work, right? We engage people in community-based research partnerships. We use the evidence from that research to build advocacy and policy campaigns. And that's the way, by taking people's voices, those who are directly impacted, we believe that we have had success. Matt talked about the New York City lead poisoning law. We were alongside Matt and others across the city in terms of fighting for that kind of change. And we were successful because, as Matt pointed out, because we were in coalition. So each of you in your program has a sheet that says, join our campaign. I want you to fill it out. I want you to pass it back to the people that you see roaming around in green shirts. I want you to also take from this space the information that you got about how toxic materials in the construction materials for our home can trigger asthma, about how mold is an asthma trigger, about how the way in which construction is done can actually impact some of our homes, about the fact that the outdoor ambient air doesn't just stay outside, it gets inside as well. And it triggers and impacts the health of residents, and that we need to build that coalition with each and every one of you in here to help us achieve some of the priorities. So the We Act for Healthy Homes campaign is a campaign that is joining forces with our allies across the city. It's joining forces with people like Matt Chachere and Northern Manhattan Improvement Corporation, like the folks at Make the Road by Walking, like the folks at the Urban Justice Center, like the folks at Community Voices Heard, like the folks at the Committee for Against Anti-Asian Violence. And so many, many other organizations are involved in trying to create change. You heard Matt make reference to the fact that there are coalitions looking and working on quality, affordable housing. So not just affordable housing, but quality housing. And to this fight, we bring this message of environment, this message of environmental justice, this message that people in their homes are on the front line of being harmed, and that those people need a voice in the policymaking process, because when people are not hearing those impacted voices, the policies can be somehow mysteriously shifted by the priorities of the landlord lobby, the priorities of the insurance lobby, the priorities of the financiers. And if you put that all together, there's an acronym called FIRE, Finance, Insurance, and Real Estate, that drives New York City politics in a way. This campaign is about changing that dynamic. This campaign is about taking some power back for the Alicia Barksdales of the world, for the mothers and fathers who are worried about their children because the buildings that they live in are creating sick children, and children who are missing school, who will then go on to miss great opportunities in life. And so this campaign is about passing the asthma-free housing bill, Intro 385, introduced by Councilmember Rosie Mendez. But that's just the first thing. That's the first thing that we're going to continue to we want to tackle in this fight to really transform our homes. It is, as Matt went through, a great bill. We encourage you to not only talk about what you learned here, but call your council members. Call your council members. And if you sign up on this campaign sheet, we will get information back to you when you let us know that you are ready to participate in this campaign. But we want to urge people to call their council members and say, first act in the Healthy Homes campaign is you got to pass City Council the Intro 385 bill. And then we will have other bills for you. We will have other bills to deal with formaldehyde in our homes. We will have other bills to deal with toxic chemicals that trigger asthma, asthmagens in our homes. And we will have other bills to make sure that the materials that are being used to build the affordable housing, Mayor de Blasio, will be healthy for the communities that we live in, especially when it comes to the low-income communities, because we know that there is a definite power imbalance there. But this campaign also seeks to ensure that healthy and affordable housing for all New Yorkers, especially moderate and low-income New Yorkers, is not just a privilege, but a right in the city of New York. And we seek to protect our home from mold and many other toxins. So I want you to sign up, pass this out, pass it back to the people in green, and I want you to, take a look and read the RX for Asthma Healthy Affordable Housing sheet that we as a coalition put together with Matt and many others, and you will be hearing more about Intro 385 today again. So please take a second to do that. We won on lead together. We have examples of good collaborations, as with Al's work at the Natural Resources Defense Council and his work with making NYCHA more accountable to residents in terms of remediating and repairing mold conditions. But NYCHA is but one city agency. It was great for Matt to point out that joke about the HPD lawyers. I know I'm speaking a little too fast. It's just because I'm getting excited, and so I'm curbing my enthusiasm just a tiny bit so the translation can happen effectively. But we won on lead. We know that Al was able, through his legal work in partnership with community-based organizations on the ground in communities, we were able to reform the way that NYCHA is working. And NYCHA isn't up to speed just yet, but we're going to keep pressing on them, and with your help, we will get public housing in this city to be healthy housing in this city as well. And now we've got to take on the rest of this nugget. Now we've got to really work on building a coalition that helps us tackle this issue of healthy and affordable homes.
Who's got the mic? I see right there. Is there any questions? Right here? Go ahead. I don't think it's working. No.
Hi, I have a question for Matt about the Intro 385. You said it's been introduced every year for 6 years. What do you think is the reason why they haven't held a hearing when we have such a committed activist council?
Is this on? Yeah. Okay. I think pretty much for the reasons that both Cecil and I said, that power concedes nothing, and real estate and other powerful forces in this city don't concede anything. You can have the greatest bill out there, and you can have, I think we had well over a majority of the council members sponsoring it. The prior speaker, Chris Quinn, never allowed it to come up for a hearing. And it's only going to happen when you create enough of a critical mass of people demanding that there be action on this. But this bill, in largely the same form, has been introduced again and again. It got sidetracked a few years ago. The city said, why don't you let us do a pilot project? And I think pilot projects are just a way of kicking the can down the road. That's my own view. So, we know what the problem is and we know what the solution is. It's only going to happen when enough pressure is brought to make it happen. A colleague of mine once said there's only two things politicians understand: money and pain. We represent constituencies that don't have a lot of money, so sometimes you got to work on the pain part of it.
I'll just add to that. It's, sidetrack is a nice word. It was killed. It was killed, right? And the reality is that we have to organize to create a different kind of power balance to make the priorities that we care about come forward. Pilot projects are, there's a value for piloting things. There's no question about that, and I don't want to be dismissive of that. But it's interesting how when there is such a wide-scale problem across the city with mold, it was on the front page of the New York Times above the fold several years ago, okay? That, to me, indicates that you are past the issue and time of piloting. It is about change that is necessary at that moment. If the front page of the New York Times is saying that this is a crisis and we can't get action, then there is a more powerful force withholding it and killing it. And we've got to out-organize that force every time.
I think we got time for about 2 more questions. Right here.
Hello? Oh, hi. I've got a question for the panel. You know, I'm listening. It's clear that we have, you know, there are intersectoral approaches that are needed to solve these problems. Yet, which I think is common with, you know, any city or any bureaucracy. If you go and talk to HPD, they say, "Oh, all right, you got to talk to the health department." You go health department, they say, "Talk to HPD." So, my question is, what are your thoughts on strategies to foster, you know, more, you know, interagency collaboration on these issues?
Write it into the legislation. And that's what this bill does. This bill actually, Intro 385, you know, creates a situation where HPD, Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, you know, have to work together, and DEP as well. So you literally have to write it in that they have to do it, you know.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there's very significant problems of what I think the term is often used as siloing or stovepiping between city agencies that are involved in housing issues. And I can tell you, I see this all the time. I mean, I do a lot of litigation for tenants in housing court, and we have agencies that just go like this at each other. You know, it's their fault, and nothing happens. And I agree with Cecil that there need to be mandated ways to break down those silos.
And I think I'm sorry, I'm the littlest person up here. You also organize your tenants or your neighbors, and the more power, the more people, the more power you have, because all these agencies, you know, will listen to volume of people. If it's just me and a couple of hundred people, oh, okay, you know, we'll put it aside. But when you get thousands and thousands of people in different communities and in different boroughs and in different areas coming out and saying these are the issues that you need to address it, they're going to start listening. Because remember, everybody gets voted into a position. If they don't do what you want, then you don't vote for them. But they made promises before they get voted, but afterwards, and they're not doing it, this is when you write your legislation. You write your assemblyman, your councilman, borough president, you write anybody and everybody that's going to listen. And then you get the organizations like We Act to come out and help you.
So unfortunately, we're actually out of time, so you can find the panelists out in the field if you have any more questions. Thank you very much, and thank you to the panelists.